I prepared some screenshots just in case the application wouldn't work. But I tested it and it seems to work, so I will start with my presentation now and give you a short overview. So my work is basically involved in developing currently ChromAUI, which is a graphical user interface for the things that I've been developing during my PhD. And I want to give you a short overview of how I used and also maybe misused in some parts the NetBeans rich client platform. I will give you a short motivation of why I chose the NetBeans rich client platform for development. We'll give you an overview of the past, of the early days of basically the application when it wasn't based on the NetBeans RCP, and of the present state. And then I will try to give you a live demo, which hopefully works. So for the motivation, I needed a graphical user interface to view the processing results of MultCMS, which is a framework for metabolomics data processing. And it does produce quite a large variety of different output formats, and I simply needed a out-of-the-box solution for people to be able to view the results, to interpret them, and to use them. It should be possible for both bioinformaticians as well as biologists to use the system, and shouldn't be too complicated. And it should be extendable to support future processing result types, of course, and also maybe new data types from different analytical techniques. It should be modular, of course, which is also one of the prerequisites for being extendable. And it should be based on existing and proven solutions, so I didn't want to develop a module system on my own. But in the early days, I implemented everything the old way in Swing, and using basically a monolithic project setup. File menu entries were hard-coded in the code, and I had lots of boilerplate code who was selected and tracking selection and doing actions on them. There was no real modularity at all, so the first viewer application was more like a hack of a few days, based on homebrew components basically, and it was mainly unusable for other people than the developers of the program themselves. So the current state of ChromAUI is it's containing now 11 modules for different file types, views, and editors. It has prominently as modules a pipeline editor to define processing pipelines for MultCMS, a chromatogram viewer which supports one-dimensional and two-dimensional chromatograms, and a heat map chromatogram viewer for new types of chromatograms that we just have, a mass spectral view, a table data view, and other things. There is code sharing significantly between some of the modules, and in a future iteration I will probably pull out much of these interdependencies into a separate module to reduce dependencies. It is very easy to add new file types using the wizard from NetBeans basically. So defining new plugins is quite easily done and very fast to do. What is still to come is the integration of remote pipeline execution support, so that we can basically run MultCMS pipelines directly on the CVTech grid engine or other grid implementations, and the import and export of peak data from LTP. So that's current work. And that's basically everything. Those are the screenshots now, and now I will try to change to the live demo. So, what you can see here is a zoom in on the pipeline editor that I just opened. And basically this is based on the visual library, so I think we will have more on that today. And it allows you basically to add new processing commands using the wizard interface of NetBeans. And here you have a list of all the available commands that are found on the class path, which is currently not done by the lookup API, but by the service provider API that is part of JDK6. You have all these different algorithms here, and can choose from them, and can add them to the processing definition. So for example, I can select the peak finding algorithm, and we use some custom annotations to allow for custom configuration of these commands, and the default values for these are displayed in this small table. And you can also set these values here if you like, and then finally add this command to everything else. Switch to connection mode and connect the command to the pipeline, and we can try to validate the pipeline. Everything looks fine. Yeah, the thing is, currently you can also save these pipelines and export them, but you cannot execute them yet from within ChromAUI, so you still have to change the command line to execute them. But in a future release you will be able to also execute these pipelines. Basically we have different project types defined, so the project type for defining processing pipelines and project is the Chroma project type. And in here, this pipeline that I was just showing is this one down here. So it has a custom, I don't know if you can see it, this has a custom icon and it's registered as a custom data type. The thing is, if I open this now, this will give an exception. So I have different commands associated with the file type, like display a pipeline editor and run pipeline, and the default component, which is simply the text editor from NetBeans RCP. So if everything else fails, you can still edit it as plain text. But of course we would like to run a pipeline, but in this case, yeah, we have a problem because this stuff is not yet implemented. So some other things that you can see here is the results type, project type, more or less, marked by MCMS, which is the acronym for remote CMS processing results. You see that we have pipelines which are, the results are structured and numbered by their occurrence in the pipeline. And we can now, for example, look into this and select a two-dimensional chromatogram, and we will see some custom actions for that. So we can have a view at the file structure, which doesn't work on this one, okay. So this is the problem of a live demo probably. I think I might select a different project where it probably works. So here you see the basically project type browser, where you can open new projects or existing projects basically. So now this one is open and selected, and we can go into here and have a look at this chromatogram, and it doesn't work. Okay, very nice. Yeah, I just recently switched from NetBeans RCP 6.8 to 6.9, and there are still some issues. Not everything is working as expected, so I hope this doesn't work. Okay, so now I have a problem, so I will switch back to the presentation as I said, and give you some impressions on the different components. So basically this here is the chromatogram view for one-dimensional and two-dimensional chromatograms. On the bottom down here is a heat map view, and these are all charts which are created by JFreeChart, and they are all linked to each other. So if you click on this one, then it is selected down here. This is not done via lookup or anything, but with onboard methods of JFreeChart. We also have some variation of that, where basically you have the two-dimensional heat map, and here you have the corresponding mass spectrum for clicking on one of these points down here. So these are two-dimensional heat maps. There are some additional view modes up here that you can switch between, which aid in having not too cluttered desktop. Of course, you can also pull these windows around and stick them into other places. And finally, there's a neat view, which is not really visible on this viewer. Just a second. So basically, the program allows to compare two-dimensional chromatograms And what you should see here are some yellow ridges and some red and green. And basically this is after aligning two different chromatograms to each other and shows a differential visualization in 3 dimensions. This is just playing. This is not really interesting for science yet because there's nothing there that displays actual peak positions or anything, but we're planning on doing this so that you can actually load a peak list to this and select the peaks, and they are visualized in the 3-dimensional view as well. Okay. Finally, I have some more visualizations that you can do. And I will also show one in the UI which should work. Basically, if you want to compare chromatograms, you can define similarities between chromatograms and calculate them. And if you calculate them for all pairs, you get a heat map matrix, basically, which shows you how related individual chromatograms are. And this is also one of the visualizations that we offer. Now I have to look for some result data. So we have, I don't know whether you can see this very well, we have different icons for the different data types. So they were all added as different data types to the NetBeans RCP. We have different modes for the CSV files, so you can open them as a chart directly, or you can open them as a table. And this is an example of the multi-view API in NetBeans, which you can use to view the same domain model in different views directly in one component. So basically we have the chart here, which is currently empty because we didn't select anything. And this is the table, and here basically we could now select different things. For example, we can select the retention time apex of the peaks as our domain values. Then we could add, for example, the areas to the chart, and if we want to have the association to the files, we can set this as series labels and have a view on the chart and see it updated accordingly. Yeah, this is basically a custom chart component that we will be using in an external module so that others can use it as well for charting. It allows to select different renderers for the shapes, for the data points, and it's quite nice like that. Oh, this one is not really nice. Yeah, and you can use this table to explore your data and basically visualize some things that you got. For example, here the peak areas. Yeah. I think we also have a data set for the 2D peaks. I have to find out where I put it. I think down here. Was it the peak occurrence map?
It was.
I think so. Yeah, correct. Okay, so here we have a result data set for the 2D chromatography. It has 2 retention times, an area and a file name, and basically what we can do here, we can set this as domain values, add this as the secondary values, and again set this as series labels. And what we get here is more or less a pseudo 2D chromatogram marking all the peak positions, and down here having all the files associated to them. So now you can zoom in and look at how your individual peaks are basically lying in the chromatographic plane. And later on we also will have some visualizations where you can see in which group they ended up. So we have an algorithm which tries to group the peaks between the chromatograms, and this will also be displayable with this component. So I think that's about all for now, and I would thank you for your attention.